All right, so here we are closing day number 22, up 5.73% ROE and a P&L of $150.48. And that certainly seems positive on the surface. But remember yesterday when I said I'm going to be looking for sympathy momentum today? Well, guess what? I found it. I found it early. I recognized it immediately. I did all the necessary research. And then I not only missed the initial move thanks to screwing around, but I then butchered all three trades that I took on the sympathy play, which was, God, I don't even remember the symbol anymore. Hold on. CNST. And I'm done for the day. I've cut myself off. I've done like a disciplined circuit breaker here in that I think I managed these trades poorly today. I was green on all three, by the way, on my trades on CNST, but I took an astounding amount of risk to get there. And I'm not okay with basically any of my trades, except for maybe the last one. And the background here too, something that's really important is yesterday after I closed and after I made the recap, I had a really good night. I had a friend over. We joked around a little bit. We made some videos together. We hung out and had a great supper. I had a steak dinner. I treated myself a little bit yesterday for my good execution on whatever it was, NXTC yesterday. And I finished the night up by having an amazing sandwich, which I don't know why, but it just totally boosted my attitude. I had a sandwich before bed that was just an absolute experience. Like, I'm not going to get into it, but let's just say I definitely made myself an amazing sandwich. And that put me in a good mood, and that mood followed through to the morning. And my pre market routine was immaculate. I went through all the checklist items that I needed to. I performed very well in the morning. I was super happy with myself. And so let's get into the trades, and I'll explain how the rest of my morning went. So I'm not going to show the charts on my first trade on OESX. I was taking a speculative entry pre-market. You can see I entered at 8 o'clock a.m. and I took an anticipatory entry of the break of the pre-market high, which also coincided with the daily chart where there was a resistance level at 350 and then there was a huge window all the way up to $5. And I took a starter that didn't work out. As soon as it came back down below 50, it kind of faded. And then when I saw an opportunity to get out at only 4 cents damage, I took it. And you can see too that my hold time was 21 minutes. So it took me 21 minutes just to lose 4 cents. And I did have worse unrealized profits in this. I think it went down to 336 if I remember correctly before coming back up. And so looking back on this trade, I'm actually really happy with this exit. I'm happy I didn't get any greedier. I didn't try to wait for a green close on this one. I had noticed that I was kind of pointing towards the direction of over trading pre-market, which leads to a red day, which makes me hesitant and might lead me to lock up early, which could then, have the butterfly effect sort of making me miss out on whatever big runner took place later on. And so once I closed this trade and I found myself, down $14, I was actually happy with this. I think the worst that this trade got was negative 30, and I would have been okay with that too. But in this case, I just thought, well, this is okay. Just lock it up for now, wait for the bell, and be patient. And in between this trade and my discovery of CNST, I actually really love what I did because I did nothing. I was just patient and I was happy being patient. I was looking around the market and I didn't find anything I like, and I didn't take any speculative entries beyond the one I took on OESX. And that made me feel really good. And then shortly after the bell, I found CNST, and that was a big deal. So up here on the 1 minute chart is what we're focusing on, and this is more or less what I was seeing the first time I looked at CNST. And I thought, okay, we're approaching like a sort of a double top of the high of day, and this is looking pretty strong. It's consolidating above the VWAP, and volume's a little bit light so far, but it is a more expensive name. We have to be lenient on the volume. And what I really liked was how it flushed out of the open and then immediately shot back up. It showed a lot of support, and I was like, why is that? And so I looked it up and I found a headline, which is great because, I was looking for potential sympathy for the move on NXTC yesterday, and this seemed to me like a good candidate. And the more that I looked into this, the more criteria it filled, and it ended up being an absolute picture perfect sympathy move. And if we look at the daily chart, which I'll extend here and zoom out, you'll see that there's nothing to speak of in the way of resistance above the level that it had already broken. And so I thought, wow, that's the same thing as NXTC yesterday. It doesn't have any overhead resistance. And, it's making super significant volume compared to previous days. And given the fact that the volume was low, that was my main concern. And then I look back on some of these other days and thought, well, look at what this thing can do on low volume. If it ever gets a surge, this could be, a parabolic mover easily. And so that's what I was thinking. And I was planning to take like a pretty substantial amount of shares. I was initially looking at $18 for the risk level, and I had planned to get in with like 50 shares, adding every dollar or so another 25 or 50 shares. And what ended up happening on this one was I was screwing around basically. I was the rest of the day was slow, and I was in the Velocity chat room just kind of cracking jokes and screwing around. And I ended up missing this move that resolved. This is the move that I was looking for, and I missed it. So my plan on this had been to take a small number of shares up in this exact move and then wait for a halt or wait for some sort of sign of extreme momentum and then start adding aggressively to build perhaps a 200 or 300 share position for the parabolic move that I did really believe was going to happen. And I called it out at this time. As it was halted, I called it out in the chat room. And people started paying attention to it too. And, everybody else seemed to realize the same thing that I had picked up on, which was it has all the makings of a sympathy play. And my first trade on this included a misclick that was pretty significant. For some reason, I just had a brain fart and I took 125 shares, which was not my intention. I would have liked to add 125 shares at this time if my initial entry had been down here. But it wasn't. I didn't get in at $20. This was my first entry at 24. And at first I was thinking, oh, sweet, my accident is going to work out greatly in my favor because we got a huge volume surge and we pushed up all the way to 25.50 where there was a halt forming. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. If I'm going to take 125 shares into the first halt, looks like we're going to be making like $1,000 on this trade. And it ended up bouncing off that level and coming back all the way down to, $24 again to my entry. And so on the next candle, in the first few seconds of the next candle, when it spiked back up to that level and met the same kind of resistance, the same kind of action in the tape, that's when I was like, hey, no, we're not doing this. I'm not going to sit around and wait for this thing to crush me. I'm going to get out right now, and then I'm going to get back in with appropriate share size at a later time. And that's exactly what I did. You can see I got a pretty good fill here on this, pretty close to a top tick. At 24.81, I just ditched the whole thing and reevaluated. And pretty much as soon as I took that exit, I was rewarded by a huge pullback that I would not have had the stomach for, I don't think, where it broke back below the halt level, the previous halt level, which I started thinking might look like an actual breakdown, and this might just not, the play that I had in mind, the big parabolic move, might get killed if this thing drops below the previous halt level. Instead of that, it bounced off 22 and it came back up. So I'm really happy that I had the presence of mind and the quick hands to be able to get out at 24.81 and avoid having to stomach this drop, because I know myself, I don't think I would have been able to stomach this. I think I would have stopped out lower down, and this would have been, instead of a $100 winner, it would have been like maybe $100 or $120 loser, which may have been enough to turn me off from getting back in later. Now, as it happens, I ended up getting back in on the very next 1 minute candle when I saw a good volume push coming up. And then that's when I started using the montage window to type in my orders, like you saw me do yesterday in that live video on whatever the hell, NXTC, right? So I took 50 shares this time, which made me a lot more comfortable. I had developed, a pretty good risk level of $22. I did have some primary stops in there as well that I was looking at on the level 2. And, I took an entry of 50 shares at $24.55, which maxed out my risk at basically $125, which made me feel a hell of a lot more comfortable than I was in this first trade where I had more shares than I wanted. Now, as it turns out, we ended up double topping that 25.50 level and starting to come back down, and I kind of saw it like a repeat pattern of this developing. this move all the way back down to 22. I didn't want to hold for that. I really wanted to see explosive continuation before I started adding or even holding. By this point in the trade, the tape had become pretty choppy, a lot more choppy than I was comfortable with, and I wasn't really ecstatic about it. I had seen descending volume on the 1 minute too, and you can see on the 5 minute chart, it's really clear cut. It's almost a perfect doji candle right here. And I wanted to wait for a breakout above that level, but I found myself at this point having the problem of where am I risking off of and what's my target? Because my initial plans had been kind of derailed by the way that I had traded and the way that this thing moved. And so I found myself unsure about what the most reasonable target was, and just my plan was not able to keep up with the speed of everything happening. And that's largely why I missed out on this nice breakout that, we got halted again at 2669, resumed much higher at, or not that much higher, sorry, at 2732, which was still a substantial gap up, and then pushed up from that level, didn't even break down below 27, went all the way up to 30 before bouncing. And so that to me was like a really big missed opportunity that if I had found a way to maybe risk off this bottom right here, 2366, maybe I could have got in, but I just couldn't come up with the plan fast enough, and so I decided to sit out. Now, the place I got back in was over here where we'd bounced off this 30 level. It was a false halt up at 30.05 and come back down to just around the previous resistance, which I thought, okay, that's pretty strong. If we can get volume coming out of this, then I'm going to get back in. And you can see the volume was descending during this initial push up. And so I didn't get in there. Even though we did make a new high on the 1 minute, I decided to wait until substantial volume came in. And the candle I ended up jumping in on turned out to be a doji. I did get in pretty early on it. You can see 10:05:14. And this 25 share position too, you can see that my confidence is descending. Granted, this first 125 was a mistake. That was supposed to be 50. But this was supposed to be 50 as it was. And so we go from 50 to 25. And to me, that really shows you how my confidence was kind of fading on this. And my exit really shows it even more because I wasn't willing to hold into that halt. I saw a halt forming that I did think was going to happen. And I just found myself without a plan anymore. And I had been derailed too. My previous, the stresses that I had felt on my previous two trades had made me unable to deal with the information at the speed that I'm normally able to. And so I became aware of this in a big rush. I was like, oh shit, like where's my mental capabilities that are normally present in these plays? And I couldn't find it. And I was like, okay, let's just take a breather here and, think about this. And what I decided to do is just play it safe and exit this position at 31.46, which was the halt level. And I won't talk too much about, the rest of it, but basically I missed out on a big move. I think my correct exit would have been at the top of this candle instead. The next halt is where I should have been getting out of the positions that I was building previously. Even if we accept that I had, just basically turned these into scalps and missed this big run here, even if we accept that my next entry was only at the 29.30 where I took it, then I still think that going into the halt, I probably should have added 13 shares and maybe even another 25 coming out of the halt. I did watch this and I remember seeing quite a few spots where I was thinking about getting in, but because I didn't already have a profit cushion on the trade, I kept talking myself out of getting in. I could feel myself kind of succumbing to FOMO, and the last thing I wanted by this point was to be giving up, a $150 winner and just FOMOing myself into like a $300 loss or something stupid. That would have really pissed me off. And so I decided to just sit on my hands and cut myself off. The rest of the day too, like this resumption, this was a big gap from 37.91 up to 39.80. That's pretty substantial. And so even though it did pop up into the 40s here, I never even thought about getting in after this resumption here. I was pretty much done with it by the time that I had realized I missed the bulk of the move, which was this candle here. Because I missed this, I pretty much locked my level 2, and you can see it's still locked, by the way. That's something that's really important. If I bring the charts up to date here, you can see that back here at the start of this recap, I had marked out this triple bottom at 27.50 or so, and I didn't take advantage of this. I decided against it, and you can see that the move that I was waiting for did happen. I would have been able to capture maybe $4, or probably more realistically like 2 or 2.5. And I thought this was a good setup, and I didn't let myself take it. The sloppy executions that I had, taken on these CNST trades, this was a huge mover. It went from $20 when I first noticed it all the way up to 45, and I had barely captured, my biggest capture was $2, and that was on a 25 share position, which is, only $50. And my biggest winner on this was the first one, where I took the wrong number of shares. And so I looked at these trades and I thought, like, this is pretty sloppy stuff, man. I don't think you can keep trading today. And the reasoning behind this is that I don't want to teach myself to get away with these things and then allow myself to keep trading. The lesson that I want to drive home here is that, okay, you want to take advantage of this triple bottom later on in the day. You want to get in on this spike that happened here. Okay, well, if you want to do that, play better next time. Next time, don't make it 3 scalps that only capture a little bit like these. Instead, load up and pay attention to the higher time frames. If I was following the 5-minute time frame here, granted, I would have had to take a lot of risk to do it, but I could have just risked off the bottom of the previous 5-minute candle, and I could have ridden this all the way up to, I guess, 39.80 would have been where I stopped out on the way back down. And, that would have been an absolute home run, depending on where I added. I mean, that could have been anywhere between 500 and, honestly, like 4,000. This could have been a more than double the account day if I had been paying attention to the closer time frames. And so this is the reason I'm locking it up, and this is the reason I'm not super happy with this day. I'm happy with the result, but I'm not happy with the execution on CNST. My read on the stock was brilliant. I nailed it completely. And what really triggered me too is that in the chat room after I had called it out, I was watching everybody else just nail home runs. And here I was with a 5% daily gain on some pretty questionable executions. And so that just kind of pissed me off even more. And I decided to shut her down for the whole day. I'm not going to be coming back later or anything like that. This day's done, and I'm just going to take the money and hope to execute better tomorrow at the open. So most of the recap I spent talking about all the things that I don't like about what I did today. And one thing I'm going to show you to close is a setup on FCell pre-market, which I did not take, which made me feel really good coming into the open. And if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see that FCell was setting up in a bullish pattern where there was a pretty clear bottom at 47 and extra resistance at 45. Or support rather at 45, and I didn't take this. And if you look at the way it resolved here, the place that I was looking at where I had my hand on the buy button and I decided to take it away was 52.5, 52 cents and a half. That's where I thought, okay, this is the spot where I'm supposed to enter, and I didn't. And you can see it resolved really well. I was thinking about an initial entry of 1,000 shares and then probably adding another 500 above the high of day. Which only would have been a half penny higher. And so this could have been like probably about a $150 winner perhaps if I had taken it. And I was still happy that I didn't take it even when I'd seen the resolution. And the main reason for that is how badly this fits my preferences. This is a stock below $1, which makes the commissions higher. It is a huge float. I mean, there were orders of like 250,000 shares getting scooped up in a second. And it's super hard to read. It's something I don't have a successful history with. And so, I traded it in my head kind of. And with my entry at 52.5, I actually started selling at 57. I didn't end up getting all the way up to this 68 top. And, that's pretty relevant, I think, because I would not have captured enough to really justify this trade. And on, in an alternate history, If I had got in at 52.5 and then it flushed down and I stopped out at 47 or 45, let's say, and just lost $70, maybe that would have changed the whole way this day went. And so I'm really proud of the fact that I showed discipline on some other setups that took place. This is just one of them, but there were a couple of others, and I hesitated on all of them, and I didn't take them. I waited for the one that I was the most familiar with, and the one that I thought had the highest potential. And the one that I thought had the highest potential was indeed the fact that the one that ran. This was the big fat runner today. And, of course, I didn't capture much of it, and that's the negative side. But at least I played the one that I'm the most familiar with. And I think my trade on OESX is another example of good discipline where I didn't try to average down or do anything sketchy. I very enthusiastically accepted this $10 loss, which was, I guess, 14 with commissions. And I shut her down pre-market because I didn't want to have a snowball trading session pre-market that would lead me to miss out. And so that's something I think I did pretty well. And if we go to my trade log, we can see the accuracy is getting a little bit better at 61.5%. It's still not where I'd want it to be. But on my daily results, something interesting is happening right now, and that's I have a 5-day green streak on the daily. And that is actually a record. I broke a record today in this account. My previous one was 4, which happened, I guess, only once. And, ever since this big snowball day that really, really pissed me off, I haven't made too many gigantic mistakes. And I'm happy about that. Even though, I'm making mistakes here and there, today was a sloppy day and I still got away with 5%. And so I'm really pretty stoked about that. I've got my daily net ROE back above 2% on the average. And my win-loss ratios are still not too bad, even though it's still negative overall. The averages are still pretty positive. And so, I'm feeling good about this. If I can continue just being patient and really waiting and trying to focus on the 5-minute time frames. That's definitely something I'm looking at going forward. I'm always hesitant, I've noticed, to take a lot of risk. I always want to time my entry so perfectly that I'm never read on the trade. And although I do like that about myself, I feel like on the big movers, that's not going to work. Like on a trade today on, I already forgot the goddamn symbol. CNST, that wouldn't have been possible. I had to accept a little bit of red. I wasn't going to be able to time it perfectly and never be red on a trade or on a stock where, the spreads are routinely opening up to $1.50. And I think the lowest I ever saw them was like 6 cents or something like that. But most of the time they were 50 cents or higher. And so to be able to play these kinds of stocks, especially in these price ranges, I really do have to be able to accept greater dollar risk on these trades. And I think that's largely what cost me the missed home run today on CNST. So that's a wrap for me today, guys. I hope you found it helpful. I did not manage to capture any live video today. I didn't have the time during that first halt. And but I will be looking into it. I do have the internet upgraded now. My PC has been performing a little bit better. I did do a bit of a cleanup. And yesterday on my trade on NXTC, nothing at all went wrong while I had Movavi open, which is my screen recorder. So I will, if I have the time on future days, if I do see a setup that might be helpful to the viewer, I will try to take a live video and insert that into my recap. So until next time, this is Alex saying happy trading.